Okay. Wasn't sure if that meant you were running them up and waiting for check-ins or standing by. So, I guess I'll join you on standing by. Very good. We're just seeing who else shows up. Put you away when you exit. Hey, A4 here on the Quadrilla early from the voice net. Anybody else around? WA when you expect. And 9 OML. Good morning, Mark and Howard. Good morning to both of you. I'm tweaking the settings a little bit here. Okay. I hope everything's good on my audio. I'm here up in Hawthorne again, trying to find just the right place for the Wi-Fi. And hopefully I won't be dropping out today. Good morning. Any other early check-ins? This is AA4 file for the Marco TV now. Okay, nothing else heard. I was remiss in not getting out information again, a reminder. I haven't been lately. And I know we had talked about that particular Israeli researcher last time, Harari, and I planned on getting out information. Just been a little overwhelmed here. I hope everything's going fine for you guys in your next of woods in Massachusetts and Illinois. Any other early check-ins for the Marco DV net? This is AA4FL air control for the net that starts at the top of the hour. Medical imagery. Okay, it might be a quiet day, or maybe people are just going to be a little late to normal. But it is an earlier time. I'm not sure how the continuity is going here, the consistency. The net we seem to be used to have about 12 to 14 last week. We did okay. I think we were pretty close to that. But we seem to be losing some of the people that used to be regulars, and I'm not sure how to renew that. Other than my next issue of Ether, which is still 3 months away. AA4FL. Any other early check-ins? Go ahead.
K3FZT, Kilo 3, Foxtrot, Zulu Tango, Steve, Philadelphia. Good morning, Jay. WJD.
Well, good morning to Steve and Andrew. We got you checked in here on NetLogger. Thanks for joining us again this morning. Hopefully we'll have a few others come on in and join. I've got a little out of touch here, so I'm still in the middle of moving family members. And yesterday was moving date for my daughter at her temporary apartment so she can find a house here in Gainesville. So it was a 12-hour day yesterday of putting things away, moving things, and taking things out of storage. So I got to do it again all over next week for my father-in-law moving his house a little bit north Florida. But in the long run, it'll be easier here. So we'll start the net in just a moment. But this is AA4FLJ, working out of Hawthorne, Florida today for the Medical Amateur Radio Council, DVNet. We'll start here in just a minute. The net is not limited to Medical Amateur Radio Council members, but anyone that's interested in health-related fields or health-related treatment. That includes patients. And if do so, but it'd be nice to know that you're out there listening, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to participate. Any other early check-ins? Go ahead and make your call. Well, we're coming upon 1500 UTC here momentarily. There's click online. To the top of the hour, this is the Medical Amateur Review Council, DVNet. We meet every Saturday at 1500 UTC. I appreciate the Quantnet Array that use of it for transcoding as our members have different modalities of accessing this map. I'm coming in on MB-Stick, using the D-Star, using XRF 757A. For those of you that are using other modalities. So far we have myself, WA1EXA, N9OML, J3FCT, and WJ8B checked in. Any other check-ins? Go ahead and make your call right now.
This is N5 RTF.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for checking in. N5 RTF. PY2 BBQ has also been recording, but he may be tied up doing other things. Present me the article. I'll let you tell us about that, Howard, which publication it was. Let me go ahead and. So, from a housekeeping standpoint, all of us here are well aware of not tailing other participants so that all the repeaters and link servers can sync here on the Quantnet Array. So we have quality transmissions, not have loss. I know we did check-ins already, but are there any stations here that are checked in that have emergency priority permit? So go ahead and let me know now. VA6PW. Did you want to check in? Go ahead. Okay. Well, those are mobile. Go ahead. Okay, not heard. Are there any additional check-ins or stuff? Please go ahead and make your call. Okay, no additional check-ins. So last week we had talked about a particular Israeli researcher. I planned on a philosopher as well as historian. I planned on getting out some information about him, but I had not. It's Dr. Harari. I think it's Hariri. I'm not sure if he's in Tel Aviv or he might be in Jerusalem, one of the universities. But as a historian, he's been talking about for years humanity and the evolution of humanity and what that means for humankind. So he's not just talking about the evolution of man by natural selection, but by means of artificial intelligence or integration with technology. Let me let it drop on you. The other aspect that he's pointed out, Dr. Harari, and I need to do some more reading on him as well. I think he's got 3 major books out there. Is that individual may set up a dichotomy in the human race of haves and have-nots. That these technologies that advance humankind, at least to beyond what a normal Homo sapien would be considered to be by today's standards, may be clouded in the haves and have-nots who can afford the technology and who cannot, in a way that sounds very exaggerated for medical care now, and seem to be very philosophical and interesting. As we talk about that in the context of the restaurant one. In the context of COVID, where COVID, of course, is vaccines have been widely available, certainly to those of the not in the developing world, but in the Western world, and there's a second thought to other countries. But his concern is that as they're very expensive technologies developed, that there won't be access to that information, and also who controls all the metadata that's produced in society and what effect that has on humankind. So I think he's pretty much a proponent for social justice. Well, from a medical perspective, we can think about COVID and how I wouldn't say necessarily totally fair, but the intent for the overall good was there. We let it drop one. So as we do our roundtable discussion, feel free to talk about COVID in your community, any other concerns you have, and your thoughts about what Dr. Harari has proposed or illuminated in terms of his concerns for society. So I think he's talking more of a time frame of about another 30 years for all these happenings to become rather not science fiction, but realities in society. We let it go first to Mark, WA1EXA. Go ahead.
WA1EXA here, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Just a quick COVID report. We are back up into the red zones pretty much throughout the state, increasing deaths and increasing activity. The universities, or some of them in Boston, have their students go home early for the holidays, trying to reduce the population, I guess. and try to stem the spread. But we're getting back to the mandates for masks and stuff like that. I haven't seen anything closed up yet. So that's kind of where we're at as far as COVID's concerned. Now, the booster shots are being given out. Children are being vaccinated now in the younger ages. So as far as that goes, the compliance for the vaccination is real good, but results aren't showing that kind of a result again. And so I don't, neither does anybody else, know particularly why this is happening, but it's happening. So, and as far as the other thing goes, I think we had the medical side is a symptom of a much larger problem. Wait one. I think we are looking at a more general problem of the first world and second and third world countries, developing countries versus the richer countries, and it has to do with not only AI, but I think in medicine it has to also do with controlling climate, the effects of climate change, being able to get enough food, and I think we're kind of on the cusp of some major changes, I should say. Whether it turns out to be a very bad thing where we have riots and food shortages and that stuff, or whether it becomes a wake-up call and as a real change to the whole world and how we actually see it, I think is yet to kind of the book hasn't been written yet. We see some evidence of countries and major concerns making efforts, but I'm not sure that they're really significant efforts, and that the continues to grow. Being on the shore, where we have and are experiencing high water levels with every storm and more storms, there's a definite change in what the overall climate is, not on a year-to-year basis, not a storm-to-storm basis, but on a year-to-year basis. Just last week we had 5 tornadoes in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and we're small, but that's very unusual. So those are just kind of examples of what we're seeing here. And I don't have an answer right away, but I do think that there's a definite need to relook at how we are using all resources, not just the carbon resources, but all resources. Break one. As far as medicine is concerned, it's part of that. I mean, AI is really a growing phenomenon, but it's not being used in all countries in the same way, and very, very politicized in some countries. Other countries, it's non-existent. And you wonder where we're going with that. I'm not a philosopher, so I really can't give you a philosophical look at it other than a practical look from my point of view. So I'll pass it back to you, Jay, and give someone else a chance. No, you wait for me, Jay.
Thank you very much for the discussion there. Talking about social strife and climate change, but what about the state of the economy, not in terms of the day-to-day economy, but is there a false economy, and how much money is actually owed by every human being and every living individual in the United States? How much debt is being carried? I mean, this is just money on paper. Is the money not there? We're moving towards cryptocurrencies now in a lot of modalities. Are these false economies? Does this set up social strife if the system breaks down? I mean, even during the time of COVID, was the financial rescue one that favored the very wealthy, or in an exchange just to save jobs and houses? I mean, what's the right answer here? Is there right answer, and will society correct itself through diseases like COVID or like Zika or some tropical disease? We'll be able to keep up with the pace of the challenge as the world environment changes. Very philosophical. Call it what you may. Let it drop on. Social science, whatever we want to call it. Very deep discussions, but as health providers, we like to think that we're treating the whole of our patients holistically in terms of not just treating one symptom or one disease, but the environment for them to have better health. So I think it's fair game for health providers to have the discussion. N9OML, Howard, go ahead.
Morning, Jay, gentlemen on the net. At the beginning of your transmissions, when you first welcomed us to the net, I wasn't receiving everything. A lot of dropouts. Changed now. We're fine. As far as COVID in the Illinois and particularly Chicago metropolitan area, I paid some attention. I've been kind of distracted this week, but all the numbers appear to be up. All the potential outcomes appear to be up. The mask mandate by the governor is still in effect. Some communities have announced that they will not enforce it. There's still a strife with the major unions of some industries regarding mandatory vaccination. But I don't have any specific numbers for you guys at this point in time. I apologize. Right. And then continuing, as regards Dr. Harari's work, I'm not familiar with it. And I didn't get all the introductions, so I really don't have anything to weigh in with there. And I know now, back to net control.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm sorry about the dropouts. I'm working on 12 megabits per second here, so I don't know if I'm having any technological issues on my end. We have a lot of devices in this house that have to share that bandwidth. So, unfortunately, until SpaceX, I guess, what is their new service going to be called? Starlink. Until they have enough satellites up there to offer a wider bandwidth, unless what they just passed in Congress finds a way to accelerate that, I guess, and Hawthorne I'm living primitively compared to the gigabit speeds I have in South Florida. And I'm here much more now. Thank you for being here, Howard. Stephen, K3FCT. Good morning, Stephen. Go ahead.
AA4FL, and the group, this is K3FCT. Jay, I enjoyed the pointer to Harari, although I must say I only read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. I found myself nodding a bit. And made a mental note to return to it, and of course, the activities of the days sweep those mental notes away ever more easily as age creeps upon us. So I will have to pull up my browsing history and put his name in and see what I was looking at and get back to it. As far as COVID goes, I think we are in a very sad and frankly concerning mode where we are not only seeing an increased number of cases. Pennsylvania is one of those states, and Philadelphia is kind of leading the way in not a mere uptick, but early signs Philadelphia, but I am aware of a office full of people of varying ages, from immediate post-college interns to middle-aged executive types, in which everyone was vaccinated, although not everyone was had a booster, and 100% of the people in that office tested positive for COVID after the one young intern became ill. 100%. So, we still don't know enough about this disease. Let me break one here. So we still don't know enough about this disease. Were all of those people infected by the one ill individual, or were those people infected by others in the group? Does the presence of PCR positive testing indicate the capacity to infect others? I am not clear as to whether that's been demonstrated, and if so, to what degree. I know the speculation is that clearance is quicker, and so the numbers infected is less, but I still don't know. In any case, having heard this story, I am beginning to believe, wait one, I'm beginning to believe that we all are going to end up with this illness, but it's not clear to me what the end point is. Does getting this illness one time after vaccination mean one and done, or will this become a so-called common cold that's not so common because of its pneumonia and vascular features and lethality in at least some of the population? A lot more questions than answers in my mind. I'm going to leave it there and turn it back to you, Kay. This is K3F, said T.
Well, thank you. Stephen, what part of the country was that one experience with the office having the re-exposure and post-booster re-exposure and PCR conversion? Where was that?
East Coast major city. East Coast major city. And just to be clear, I am one person removed from from the primary source of information, and that one person that I'm removed from is a highly credible individual in my experience. K3F said.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. AA4FL for the Medical Amateur Radio Council. Okay, we've been saying all along that history will be arbitrator reality here, but uh, I would assume that we'll hear many, many more stories if that one comes right, not just a one-off. It raises a whole other series of issues. Are we dealing with the same strains, or are we dealing with strains that are rapidly adapting? So this obviously can be an ongoing issue no matter what, a surveillance, and hopefully not just reacting, but working towards something that's more manageable. But again, as others have said, when it comes to vaccinations, the goal for the vaccinations isn't to keep people from getting reinfected. The goal is to keep people from being reinfected to the point of acute illness or life-threatening illness. So it doesn't mean that vaccines are a failure. If the meter of success is not overwhelming the medical system and having a low-grade disease that one can self-treat at home and have a response. But again, just as you said, a lot of unknowns as to the future. Next, WJ8B, Andrew, go ahead. This is AA4 Fund that controls the Medical Amateur Council. TV Max, go ahead and take the line, Ken.
3 IM chicken.
On one side note, the Ohio State rival University of Michigan is having a problem on their campus with a flu outbreak. Allen East is a law school there who's affected by that, so that's on top of everything else. I was talking about Dr. Harari's topic. That's a wide-ranging topic, and you want to talk about that plus all the other things that are connected to it, and as well as climate change. I think I'll just limit my comments on the AI and computerization thing. Currently, the biggest thing I see is that we have people in Ohio that are not necessarily poor, but have little or no access to good internet. And that's because, especially in southeastern Ohio, the overall wealth there is less, particularly for rain. So using cell phones, etc., to get around, get the internet to people is not easy, and as well as the population density is so low that the people who string up fiber and cable don't want to be involved with the cost involved. So those are people that are disenfranchised. Other people are disenfranchised because they just simply don't have enough money to pay for broadband internet. And there's really no way. And that is a totally unfair situation given that so much of what we do and how we make money anymore requires the use of the computer. Even basic, warehouse jobs, etc., require that. You have to enter data into something. And if you don't learn that as part of your primary education, secondary education, there is a huge disadvantage in the employment market later on. So those are things that definitely have to be fixed. Not to mention the topic that we have a lot of very good, hardworking people that don't necessarily fit into the college education type job. And those are people we value and need in our society. And how do you make sure that they can participate and have a reasonably comfortable lifestyle? Not good for lavish, at least a reasonably comfortable one. So I think I'm done. I'll do it back to you there, Jay, from WJ.
Well, thank you for the insight, Andrew. Those of us here, we're at an age group where it's not necessarily going to directly affect us. So what we're talking about, well, I mean, obviously COVID is. What we're talking about some of these future concepts are ones for our children and grandchildren. So we owe them a debt to at least discuss this and perhaps direct them in a better direction. But if we think about, I suppose, the United States and the superhighways and the interstate systems and what the country would be like had we not had that, and compare that to what needs to be done for the infrastructure of broadband, I suppose the average person could understand it better if it was discussed in that fashion. But from a political landscape, haves and have-nots, people who don't have access or don't have proper training are not employable. But certainly, as you mentioned, to be modern and to a higher paying job, one has to have those computer skills. So let's hear from someone that I consider to be very wise, a Renaissance man, and I'm sure Chip will have some quality input for 75RTS, AA4 Alpha, Block Network Array's version of Medical Amateur Radio Council. Go ahead, Chip.
AA4FL on the net and 5RPF. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I am not as worried about things as a lot of people are. I try to, as I study history, I look at things. Things do sort themselves out. Sea level, I'm sitting here looking at it, and I can assure you it's just fine this morning. Technology gets cheaper if it's something worthwhile. It gets cheaper and cheaper and filters down to everybody on the planet. A good example is cotton. 1,000 years ago, only kings could wear cotton. Everybody else had fleas and lice all the time. Now there's not a person on the planet who's so poor they can't afford a T-shirt. So cell phones are another example. They're ubiquitous now and coming down in cost. When I was a teenager, I could not make a long distance call because I couldn't afford to. Now I don't even look to see where the person I'm calling is if I were here.
N3IM check-in. N3IM. Good morning, Keith. We'll give you a chance to be involved here in just a second. So, Jeff, what are some of the other similar to cotton things that used to be? I mean, I can think of salt. Wasn't salt a very valuable commodity at one time? What other of these in today's world are or moderate that the masses enjoyed. It used to be luxury items. What else can you think of? Then 5 RTF AA4 so.
I would include automobiles. When they first came out, they were playthings of the rich. Of course, the rich also got to enjoy the first automobile accidents. But eventually they got down in cost to where my first car, I think I paid $375 for it, or my father did. And everybody had a car. Now the world is changing and people suddenly do not need cars as much anymore. But again, there was, the technology comes down in cost. Televisions, I remember the first color TV that I saw in the 60s probably cost, I'm just guessing, but I would say $500 at that time, which was more than some cars. And then it gradually came down until you could just buy one as almost like you would buy groceries in 5 RTF.
QSL, Jeff. Jeff, what about some of the first amateur radios you bought? I mean, I remember seeing ads from the 1950s and 60s, and it seems like, from a cost relation standpoint, amateur radio equipment was much more expensive. Do you perceive the same thing?
uh, heavy steel and transformers and vacuum tubes. It took an adult to even lift one. Um, and people have compared prices back then to prices now, and the top end radios are probably about the same. $500 columns or something like that. In the late 40s, it'd probably be about a $10,000 top end rig now. Um, but of course the features are what sets us apart now. I mean, every you have hundreds of times more features. Back then it was enough to just have CW and single sideband. Now you've got all the digital modes, you've got all of the recordings, you've got downloading operating systems and screens, and it's a totally different game. But again, this that technology starts out with hands, and eventually everybody's holding a cell phone in their hand, whether they know how it works or not, in 5 RTF.
AA4 from Marco Medical Amateur Radio Council TV Net. Let me just change the thought for a second to an ethics question. Potentially costs can go down. But what about a company like Apple that produces an iPhone where the prices are continually going up? Yes, it's sophisticated, but an $1,100 or $1,200 high-end iPhone. Does that represent fairness in the world when the profit ratio is so high? I mean, where do you draw the line on what's allowed to be made? I mean, does society drive that? I mean, they're cold items apparently, but excuse me. Then we also have stockholders that expect a return on their money. So theoretically, if everything was fair, mass production would reduce the cost. But in reality, do you really feel that's practiced in today's marketplace? N5 RTF, AA4SL.
Well, first of all, I'll quote Scott Adams: "Fair doesn't exist. It's that's a concept for children. In the real world, you have to make your equality, and that's the real problem with people who want social justice. It's not social justice will happen whether you want it to or not. It's just how long will it take? And people are in a hurry and they want it now. The robber baron families of the 19th century supposedly had all the wealth in the country, But nowadays, other than maybe the DuPonts and Rockefellers, everybody else is just middle class from those families. Everybody has lost all of the money that their ancestors made, and that's pretty typical. One day Apple won't exist anymore; it'll just be a memory. I have personally never bought an Apple product and get along just fine without them. I wouldn't buy anything with a Microsoft operating system in it if I didn't have to run specialized software for work. There's plenty of stuff on Android and Linux and all that you can use for free, as evidenced by the way that we stream the nets every week. So it's out there, and if it's worthwhile, somebody will copy it, somebody will make it cheaper, and eventually everybody that wants it will have it. It's just when you want it right now is when you have riots and revolutions and people die. In 5RTF.
N4TSC, can you copy me now?
Okay, I do copy Jerry N4TSC, and I've got you checked in, Jerry. You're two down the list here, so we're going to go ahead and hear from Keith N3IM, and then I'm going to let you get a chance at the, yeah. Go ahead, Keith.
This is N3IM with the group. Well, Pennsylvania is showing a little bit of an increase in the COVID population, but 73% of the population is fully vaccinated, and I guess it's a matter of the Delta virus. I believe deaths have been a little bit less, but we've had quite a bit of increase. The other thing I have to offer is interesting that there's been a number of articles now about the low COVID rates in Africa, and they're not sure why that's happening. And it's mostly hitting 60 and older Africans, where the majority of the population are much younger. So youth may have something to do with that, or maybe there's something in the environment down there that is not allowing for the COVID to be as active. Break one. N3IM in the group. The other thing I've got questioning in my mind is we're seeing a lot of people in the healthcare professions leaving, physicians and nurses both. Some of it has to do with the way the administrations treated their staff and not acknowledging what they were going through. But some of it has to do with the administration pushing the staff to work harder and longer. And some of it just has to do with typical burnout. So we may be facing a physician and nurse shortage here in the future. Interestingly enough, some nurses have quit their job, become a traveling nurse, and the same institution that was hiring them before is now hiring them at a higher rate with more benefits. So some nurses are being smart about it in some ways. But those are the three things that I have to contribute this morning. This is N3IM and AA4FL and the group. Back to you guys.
Points well taken, Keith. That labor versus employer balance, you would think that would be more commonplace even outside of medicine. You have workers that enchanted. I suppose right now that, as you mentioned, the value isn't a priority for healthcare workers. And they can dictate more so what they want to do. Thanks for that input. I haven't thought about that lately, especially with traveling nurses. But I heard your point there. Jerry, N4TSC, this is AA4FL, the Medical Labor Trade Council. DDNet, go ahead.
Okay, A4FL and 4TSC. I've got kind of a Rube Goldberg setup here right now, and I'm plugged in directly to the wall, and I'm using an outboard microphone. Hopefully it'll hold up. The last time I turned it switched out. You covered a whole bunch of topics, so let me just go sort of a little bit in reverse order. As far as physician burnout is concerned, or physicians leaving, that was an article that I read last night in one of the journals. They gave a list of 7 reasons why people leave in medicine. Interestingly, the largest number is among women physicians, and the reasons that were given were not just COVID, but it's the lack of independence, the time that you have to spend with EHR. Since we're talking about computers, we'll get to that in a minute. They're overworked, they don't like the administrations, and they don't have family time. Let me stop for a second and bring it back to talk about some of the other issues that we talked about this morning. Wait one. Okay, so you got to talking about the effects of computers and so on. With anything that we have to deal with, what we are dealing with in terms of pricing, it has to do with supply and demand. It just goes back to basic economics. And unless you have a monopoly in which you have control, for example, right now with the medications that is used to treat COVID, it costs an estimated $17 to make it, and they're going to ask for $750 for it. That price will come down as competition comes in, so supply and demand will work there. As far as artificial intelligence is concerned, we have warnings right now about artificial intelligence that if the algorithms that are used continue to deal based on mathematical calculations, we are at risk of getting into all kinds of issues because artificial intelligence is headed to creating its own method of making choices. And that gets into issues of where do you make choices of humanity? And there are examples of that right now. If you have artificial intelligence determining whether or not you avoid a car coming at you, do you, if you are having a car coming at you, do you swerve in a particular direction to avoid the car coming at you and then risk hitting other people who are bystanders on the side, or do you make a choice to avoid those bystanders? Obviously, the example can be put to the extreme. If you have a young child, whether you avoid going into the car in front of you or go to the child, that has to do with the algorithms that we set up for this. Wait one thing. On a personal note, we were talking about COVID. I just lost a friend a few days ago of 70 years. I was 10 years old when I met him. He was a real good friend, and he had been in good health by all reports and developed breakthrough COVID, was hospitalized for 10 days and finally succumbed to it. Now, these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to get more information about, and as time goes on, we will get a better handle on what is happening with COVID and our ability to control it. One would hope we get it to the point where we've got it under control, where we can deal with it in the same way that we deal with influenza these days. We get a new shot every year, and we hope that we cover the variations that are there. However, unknown, and it's a matter of time. Anecdotally, I spoke with a friend in France who tried to travel to Israel, and he had to go through the PCR test 4 times. Once before he boarded the plane to Israel, once when he got to Israel, he had another PCR test. He was isolated for 24 hours, and even on leaving, they wouldn't let him leave Israel until he had a PCR test. Had to wait 24 hours to board the plane, and then got back to France. And now he reports that they've gone in the last few days from 15,000 cases per day to 200,000 cases per day, and they closed the borders. So these are the kinds of issues that all of us are dealing with. They're anecdotal because they're not in continuity and not one connected to another. But these are the kinds of issues that you guys brought up today, and I just thought I would get some information about it. With that, let's turn it back to AJ, and hopefully you can copy everything. 84 FL, N4TSE, not terribly special.
Thank you for the description, Jerry, particularly about the traveling friend. You know, we were supposed to do the expedition, a group of us, to St. Martin in May. We decided to postpone or cancel, considering maybe going for CQ Worldwide in October. But what good does it do to go for a week for a situation where you might be faced with similar issues such as Jerry mentioned? It makes predictability of travel problematic and risky in terms of if you did test positive, you know, what would happen then, even if it was a false positive. So I understand that totally, and right now we'll have to monitor what happens over the next 6 months. But regardless, as everyone here has said, time will tell, and you know, whether this is going to be seasonal or we just don't know exactly what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and do a follow-up round, and I'll let Mark WA1EXA go. Before we do, Mark, are there any other check-ins? Anyone else that's monitoring would like to check in and ask a question? So make your call to that control AA for us. None heard. WA1EXA. Go ahead, Mark.
WA1EXA, and it's been very interesting, and a number of topics have come up that bring about three issues I just want to bring up. One, the issue about people leaving their jobs. It's not, we're seeing here that it's not confined to medical people. It really looks like anybody dealing with the public directly. There's a significant number of people that have gotten out of the hospitality business. A number of people have gotten out of the direct direct sales business, and it seems to be, from what I hear here, is that it has to do with people feeling that the public is not respected and has abused people too long. At least that's what we're hearing out here, and while, yes, we have the same problem with the medical side of things, it is not exclusively that, at least in this area. Break one. The second thing is, as far as COVID, one other thing I forgot to mention is that we are now shifting people via air helicopter transport because our ICUs are full. And that's very unusual, at least in the eastern part of Massachusetts. We have lots of ICUs in Boston, but they're full. And we're transferring people to Connecticut and probably to northern New York State via helicopters. And that seems to be something that occurred over the past week, where this has become widely known that this is going on. So that seems to be something new that we haven't need to look at before. The other thing is, wait one. The other thing is one issue that I did not hear anybody bring up, and that is the concentration of wealth in the world. I mean, are we looking at autocracy really for all countries, where there is a small number of people that basically are calling the shots, whether it's obvious or way behind the scenes? We have a very small number of people that are significantly higher incomes and more assets than anybody else, and we're looking at that 1% that people talk about, or 0.5%, whatever it is. But the differences and their influence on how things happen, how fast they happen, and who gets what is going on is significant. Whether we want to address it or not, or whether we know it or not. And that's another issue that I have not heard anybody talk about. So, not that I have answers, but I do have questions. Back to you, WA1EXA.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up, Mark. From a personal standpoint, it's interesting, from a political standpoint, having a two-party system where either one or the other are independent. But you would think that uh, there are people in the same political party that meet both ends of the spectrum. You just described, and why individuals that are at one end of that wealth gap tolerate it or feel that the other values they're voting for. I mean, is the two-party system one of artificial? We'd be better off with multi-party systems. We know what a mess certain countries have when it comes to making coalitions. So life is strange and life is difficult. We can't solve all the world's problems, but certainly they're grounds for discussion. Thanks for bringing that up. And I don't know, Howard, go ahead.
And I know about. I think I'll take the easy way out, because I don't think I have any better answers to the discussion we've heard, other than I'm sometimes perplexed by how ubiquitous cell phones are in areas where people apparently can't afford anything. Everyone seems to be able to produce a cell phone, if there's anything interesting to film. But the gear I'll switch to is just a quick mention regarding Hilton. I think it's pretty close. We went to BB2, I think, or awfully close to that. He was mentioned in an article in the ARRO Aries newsletter that I read. We'll break once for conflict. The reference was to a tragedy that they had. Firefighters were training in a cave rescue exercise in a cave. There was a cave-in collapse, which changed the exercise to a real-world event. The nature of the terrain made it difficult to communicate from the rescue scene to the command post and coordinate things. The National Civil Defense was involved, and the ham radio groups that was responsible for organizing responded, and they were spoken of very highly in the article and in other stuff I found about it. They were able to provide a communication link to the rescue scene. It resulted in 19 rescues and 9 recoveries of firefighters. So I know that wasn't on the main menu, but I thought you guys might find that of interest. This is N9OML. I hope everybody's well.
Thank you, Howard. I had planned on bringing it up and forgotten, so I'm glad you did. Thank you. We, of course, owe Wilson our gratitude for everything he does here for Marco. But when it comes to Brazil, his local emergency preparation skills have been acknowledged nationally, and he's accomplished, a very accomplished and appreciated individual there, and esteemed. And when it comes to emergency communications, so don't lose your monitoring and listening to the recording later. Congratulations and thank you for all you do for the public and for amateur radio. K3FCT, Steve, go ahead. Okay, not hearing Stephen right now. Was there another station, N9 station? Did you want to check in? This is AA4 Sullivan Medical Amateur Radio Council DVNet. Go ahead and make a call. Okay, nothing heard. WJ8B, Andy, go ahead. Okay, hopefully my transmissions are still being received. Doing a second go around here. If you still have some input or like to make some final comments, N5RTF, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm enjoying all of the discussions this morning. I think a lot of depth and a lot of uh, varying, but all definitely worthwhile viewpoints. Nothing much else to say. Just a beautiful day down here. It's finally gotten up to 60 degrees. So this is the depths of winter. N5 RTS.
Well, Chef, I hope you and Terry and Scooter are enjoying the wonderful weather and the new QTH. And I think we've got similar weather here. And looking forward to getting out here shortly and enjoying it. Have a great week, Chef. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving too coming up. M3IM, go ahead, Keith.
SN3IM in the group. Well, yeah, we talked about technology and electronic health record. Experiences I've had with the electronic health record show that it's not uniform from hospital to hospital. Although large hospital systems have made it uniform across the board, smaller hospitals may be using something that is not as expensive and not as easy to use, and that I think causes some anxieties. But also, electronic health records are being used to implement standardized treatment of patients, and I think that eliminates some thinking on the part of physicians and nurses, in that they're not given credit for their own thoughts about the process. They just go ahead and go through the steps necessary for that particular thoughtful diagnosis, and such as chest pain or a stroke, etc. There's certain things that you just go through and they don't think about anything else. And I think that's one of the disadvantages of the modern healthcare system. Break one. As far as the advance in technology today, it's interesting to note that we have become more and more dependent on the electronics we have to operate a day-to-day life, and we see that every day. And going back to what Chip was saying about a Collins that may have been $400 in the 40s and 50s, now being worth $10,000. However, the technology has changed so dramatically, and it also has caused a decrease. I think some of the radios we're seeing today, if they had been available earlier, would have cost more. And we see that every day in electronics as cell phone prices come down, TV prices come down, etc., and so on. But we're also seeing the problems associated with that. Break one. As we're having this chip shortage, and manufacturers are now starting to produce cars without the GPS radio type thing in their car because they don't have the chips to do it with. Back to the group. This is M3IM with the AA4FL and the Marco Group.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you for being here with us today. This is AA4FL, the Medical Image Radio Council. TVNet, we're just past the top of the following hour. We're going to be wrapping up the net here shortly. We're going to hear from Jerry M4 PSC before we depart. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Rather than go through all the list of things that we talked about before, I think I should just point out a couple of things that we talked about why we have less physicians, and we have a physician shortage now, and we should flesh out some of the reasons. COVID is at the top of the list, but that's just a transitory thing when we get COVID behind us. it will not be as big an issue, I hope. In any case, I should flush out that a couple of things that we hadn't thought about was with EHR, there are 2 hours of time spent with entering data and for every hour of patient contact. And obviously there's a two-sided problem there as well, because there's lack of eye contact when the physician is entering data. And using scribes doesn't quite solve the problem, because some of the information is things that you don't want to discuss in front of the patient, so that's an issue as well, and we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with EHR. But that's one of the reasons why people are dropping out. The other thing, which is a real surprise, is abuse by patients, where patients will actually argue and fight with the physician, which is a surprise to me. But that's an issue that has come up, and it's also an issue trying to figure out. Well, sometimes these patients think that they understand what's going on because they read in the internet so and so and figure out, okay, this is the way things present, and they argue with the physician. Now, I was surprised to read that, but that's one of the other factors. And of course, the reason why we've got a dropout in the number of people working is because they feel overworked, there are administrative issues, there's lack of family time, and also the lack of independence that we have because of corporate medicine taking over. So those are some of the things that maybe in the future you might want to address or talk about. Anyway, AA4FL and 4TS.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jerry. That would be an interesting discussion thread, and we do need to find a way that other members in Marco will elevate their desire to participate. Perhaps be willing to try digital voice. I don't know how we stimulate it. We keep on offering they can hear recordings such as today's, which I'm sure Chip is making, and perhaps that's the best way for them to consider participating, enticing them to listen to today's conversation and see if these kind of discussions are of interest them. But we're essentially, maybe we should be recalling ourselves sort of the Marco electronic coffee house. So that's pretty close to what we're doing, just getting together and discussing topics over coffee. So we need to encourage everybody to have a cup next week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone, and thank you for participating today. And we value your friendship as well. This is AA4FL Net Control from the Medical Amateur Radio Council. DVNet calling the net to a close. Saying sounds ready for next week.
730, and thank you, Jay. That'll be really next.